Hello, and welcome to Appleton Engaged. I'm your host, Timber Smith, DEI coordinator for the city of Appleton. And Appleton Engaged is a podcast that explores the many people, organizations, and resources that make our community a great place to live, work, and play. So whether you're a longtime resident or just getting to know Appleton, join us as we learn more about our community together. Once again, Appleton Engaged listeners, it is awesome to be back here with you. We have another amazing resource this week, but we are missing our amazing co-host, Andy Anam. Andy is tied up today, so she'll be back soon with us. Andy, if you're listening, we miss you. Okay, but on to our resource. Well, not only do we have an amazing resource this week, but you already know, we have a fantastic guest to go along with that resource. This week's guest is Mike Rohrkaste, Executive Director of Fox Valley Memory Project. How's it going, Mike?
Going great, Timber. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we're excited that you're here. But before we jump in about the resource, can you please share a little something about yourself and your association with Appleton and the surrounding Fox Cities region?
Sure. I moved here actually with my wife, an 8-month-old son, like 30 years ago. My wife actually grew up mostly in Wisconsin, and we had lived in large cities before, and we really were interested in raising our kids in a smaller community. And I actually got recruited by Menasha Corporation. So Menasha Corporation in Neenah is what brought us here about 30 years ago. And I worked there for about 10 years. Then I moved to Oshkosh Corporation and worked there for almost 11 years. I was a human resources executive. And then I retired actually in 2014 and wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. Somebody encouraged me, though, to run for a state assembly position. And I never even thought of getting into politics, but I did. And I ended up winning. And I really ran to try to use my background as an HR person, a business person, to help solve problems. I didn't go down there for any specific reason down in Madison other than, again, to solve problems in the state. In my first term, though, and this is important because it really drove what I'm doing today, is there was a request to do a study, a bipartisan study commission on Alzheimer's and dementia needs and existing support services in the state. And my mom had passed from it years ago, and honestly, I didn't understand back then what I learned. But during that time, I was then asked to head up that committee, and there was 16 legislators, half from each party, and we worked very, very well together. We traveled around the state. We learned so much, and we actually got some things done. We got things signed into law under both Governor Evers and Governor Walker and into the budget. And that's really what drove my passion. So I'm thankful that I had a great business career. I had a very interesting time in the legislature, but I'm so thrilled that I learned about Alzheimer's and dementia, and that's how I got connected to the Fox Valley Memory Project.
Well, let's just jump in. Can you please tell us about the Fox Valley Memory Project?
Sure. Memory Project is we're a nonprofit organization. We work with a lot of different organizations, but our primary mission is to support people living with Alzheimer's and related dementia, and equally important, their caregivers. We want to be able to help them from early diagnosis as the disease progresses, as it becomes more challenging. And again, I will emphasize several times, we want to equally focus on the caregiver because of some of the challenges that the caregiver has. It really affects everybody in the family if they're affected by Alzheimer's and related dementia. By the way, dementia is a broad term. It's like cancer. Alzheimer's is the most common form, and then that's why I use Alzheimer's or related dementia, because there's other types of dementia, but Alzheimer's is the most common form.
How long has the Memory Project been around?
We've been around over 10 years. We became a separate 501c3 nonprofit in 2018. And then we significantly expanded as the result of a large federal grant at the end of 2021, early 2022, We moved from just covering Outagamie and half of Winnebago County to covering all of Winnebago, and now we also support families in Waupaca and Calumet County too.
What does that support look like?
So we offer support in a number of different ways. We have 2 full-time and 1 part-time resource navigators, and they use what's called an evidence-based care support model, and they proactively work with the family. So the person with dementia, the caregiver, they try to identify what the most pressing, the current need that they have. They help educate them on how to handle some of the challenges, what to expect as the disease progresses, also to connect them to other resources in the community. So they might be able to help with, and this is an example of something. Oftentimes when the Alzheimer's gets to a point it might not be safe to drive, the navigator can help them solve that it's not an easy thing to do, but they can help the family work with the person to eventually explain and have them not drive anymore so that it's safe for them and safe for others on the road. But if you think about it, I know if my wife wanted me not to drive, that would be very traumatic for me.
Oh, pretty much. Yeah. You feel like all your freedom's being taken away from you.
Correct. And the caregiver's freedom is also being taken away because now my wife, if I was in that situation, would have to drive me around all the time.
Right.
So it might sound easier than it is, but it's a very challenging thing. The navigators can help with that. If they're not sure where to go for a diagnosis, they can connect them to organizations like the Neuroscience Group here or to Theta and to connect and get a diagnosis. If they're looking for in-home care, long-term care, they can connect. They work very closely with the Aging and Disability Resource Centers to connect them to the county dementia care specialists. And that's actually something that I and others worked on in the legislature to help promote that program throughout the state. And it's a great resource, and we work very well together. They refer people to us, we refer people to them, because they can do things we can do, and we can do things that they can't. We also provide programs for the families, for the individuals with dementia and the caregivers. We run 18 different memory cafes each month. Those are designed for both the person with dementia and the caregiver to attend together. There's usually a theme. It could be music, dance, craft, celebrating like St. Patrick's Day recently. We also run 11 weekly, we call them MindWorks classes, and these are 3-hour facilitated classes by our staff that we run 11 of them every week, and it's for people early to mid-stage, and the caregiver does not stay. So we are taking up to 12 individuals in a class setting, and we use therapeutic recreation protocols, and we develop both physical, mental, and social engagement activities for them to participate in. It's equally, though, important for the caregiver because it provides them respite time, 3 hours. While their loved one is at our class, they have 3 hours to, sometimes they just sit and wait for those 3 hours and read a book. Other times they might take care of their own health appointment needs, do the shopping, go home and take care of some things at home, and then come back and pick up their loved one. We find that it's extremely beneficial for both of the individuals because of the respite time for the caregiver, but it's also really important for the person with dementia. They start to develop friendships and connections. They don't always remember maybe what happens in the class or what they do on a given day, but the positive feelings. Some of the things that they may work on could be a craft, could be trivia. Music we use a lot. We've actually had them make kites. They're working on sanding benches and staining those benches that will actually be used to put in on a fundraising auction for us. So we focus on things that people with dementia can do, not what they can't. And an example of that is that people with dementia, parts of the brain are affected later in the disease progression, and those parts are the longer-term memory, the creative side of the brain. So that's why we focus on things that they may have done when they were young or in their career, or music, art, dance. I've literally seen someone who had Alzheimer's ask his wife to dance at a memory cafe because a particular song clicked in memory of that. And I learned later that they used to run a Arthur Murray dance studio. And it was amazing to see. And it created what we call a moment of joy for both him and for her, because they probably don't do that at home too often. And it was something that was enjoyable for them. So those are positive things, examples of some of how our programs can have an impact. We also can help them with some of the difficult challenges about knowing when and how best to decide if long-term care or long-term facility is the best thing, because that's an extremely difficult decision too.
How many people do you serve?
Well, we serve around 400 to 500 families, so that's around 800 or so individuals. We estimate in our 4-county service area, there's probably 9,000 people living at some stage with some form of Alzheimer's or related dementia. And then you would add at least 9,000 caregivers. Generally, you would add more because some families, one, for instance, the person's spouse is deceased. They have 3 children that share the care needs of this particular person. So sometimes there's more than one caregiver that we help. We also help about a dozen people who live home and alone with no local caregiver, some with no caregiver. They're more early to mid-stage, and we help them to stay safely living at home. And if often some of them have relatives outside the community, and so we connect with them and keep them apprised of what's happening. One thing I mentioned resource navigators can also do is do home visits and do safety inspections. And one of our partner organizations, and I'll give them a quick shout out, is Rebuilding Fox Valley. They go in and install like grab bars and showers and safety railings on stairs to make the home safer for anybody, but for us it's related to people with dementia.
What is one of the biggest myths that people, or maybe misunderstanding that people have about Alzheimer's?
So I think one is, maybe I'll answer it this way. I get two really big questions. The first question is how do I know if, as I'm aging and if I start to forget things, how do I know if I need to be worried? So what I tell people is first is that most people don't get dementia. So that's sort of one. I think everybody thinks that as they age, they're going to develop it. And the answer is no. Statistically, they don't get it. As they get older, though, so age is the biggest risk factor, so that does increase with age. But the biggest question I usually get is, how do I know what the difference is between just normal memory loss, which we all start to experience probably about in our 30s. Our memories just don't work like they used to.
That is facts.
Yes, that is. So I'll give you 2 examples. Ever since I started driving at age 16, I've lost my keys. So I still lose them. I don't worry that that's something. So if you lose your keys, even if you just started losing your keys, I wouldn't worry about that too much. If you're driving home, if I drove home from our talk here today, and I've lived in this home for 30 years, and halfway there, I got confused and didn't know what to do, that'd be a big red flag. If I pulled over and just sat in my car and didn't realize that I had a cell phone on me, that'd be a second big red flag to my wife or whoever would find me sitting on the road and asking me. So it's usually something pretty significant. And if you're concerned, talk to your doctor. There's lots of things that can cause some short-term memory loss, like if you've had a recent surgery and been under anesthesia, certain medications can cause. So it's just, if you just start forgetting things as you age, I wouldn't worry about that. It's more worrying about things like being unable to do something that you've done and has been a simple part of your life for a long time. So that's the biggest thing that I get asked.
All right. There was a pretty significant number of individuals and family members that you said you serve. How big's the team?
We have 8 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff.
Okay.
So because the staff consists of the resource navigators, the MindWorks facilitators, and We do have a grant manager. We receive funding from the federal government at this point from foundations, and so there's a lot of reporting and work that we have to do on that end.
So, Mike, at this time, can you please share a story that will help our listeners understand the importance of Fox Valley Memory Project?
Sure, I've got two, if that's okay. The first is it was a crisis situation. Candidly, somebody who knew me and knew what I did called me about couple of years ago, and it was right before the holidays, and they had been called by the state police in a different state and as it turned out, the their mother had been found by state troopers sitting in her car, had run out of gas and on the road and seemed confused and was telling the officer that she was going to visit her husband. And then the officer learned that her husband had passed away a few years ago. So it was a pretty crisis situation. So that's an example I gave earlier of somebody that started to drive, didn't know what to do, ran out of gas, didn't know that they had how to handle that, and they didn't remember that their spouse had passed away. So pretty significant. They were living by themselves, so this obviously the family lived here in the Fox Valley, so they had to work to figure out how are we going to make sure our mom is safe, take care of this situation. They connected with us. They connected with one of our resource navigators. Our resource navigator helped connect them to an organization, Care Patrol, here in the Fox Cities that helped them find facilities to potentially to move her to. And they also had to get some legal help because there's different power of attorney laws between states. And so they did all this during the holidays and actually were taking calls and texts over Christmas to help this family. And it as it turned out, it all worked out. And so that's a crisis situation. And we were very thankful to be able to help that family through that. The next story, though, is really where we hope that we don't want to have that crisis. We hope to have families understand sooner that this memory loss is happening, because then they can better prepare for it so that there isn't a crisis situation like I just described. And one family, the spouse, the wife, she was suspecting that maybe her husband had significant memory loss. And she heard about us and came to one of our support groups and just to learn from other people in the support group. And she then, as a result of that, she was able to talk more to her husband and better able to explain to him that he was showing signs of memory loss to get him to accept it. And he did, which was great. Then he was diagnosed. He comes to MindWorks every week. She still comes to the support groups. They go to our memory cafes. There's another program we do 4 lunches every month. It's just a social time for a family person with dementia, their caregiver, to meet with others and have lunch together. Because sometimes they won't go out by themselves, but in a room with other people that are familiar with some of the challenges, they'll do that. Anyway, she does that, and she's actually volunteering now for us, and she's taking care of her husband. So I guess that to us is a huge win, because she and her husband are working together they're not happy that it happened, but they're making the best of it. And they want to have the best quality of life that they can. And that's really what we're trying to help these families do. And it is challenging if you've been through this with anybody and know some of the details or the difficulties. It is very challenging, but it doesn't mean that you can't still have those moments of joy, the positive quality of life to move forward.
Are there any initiatives or events? I know you just mentioned one of the, is it weekly events that happen?
The MindWorks classes?
The MindWorks
Yes.
classes. Are there any other initiatives or any other types of events or engagement opportunities?
We're always looking for volunteers, actually at the MindWorks classes or in our memory cafes, or even to deliver lunches, to pick them up either at a restaurant or we buy lunches from St. Paul Elder Services. Another shout out to them. They help us with some things in Kaukauna. And so even just picking lunches up and having lunch with the MindWorks class, because we serve lunch during the MindWorks classes go from 11 to 2, so the caregiver doesn't stay, but we usually have 1 to 2 volunteers with our staff facilitator in the class. So those are great, and you don't have to. You could do once a month, twice a month, once a week, twice a week. I mean, it's really your schedule. We can work it into ours.
Okay, Appleton Engaged listeners, they need volunteers. But are there any events, any type of events that happen, or is there a legacy event, an annual anything?
Well, we do have a fundraising event coming up. It's April 16th. So, and it's usually in April. We have our largest fundraiser the year that is coming up. We usually do a fall event, but we haven't scheduled that yet.
Okay. What kind of event is it usually, or is it different every year?
This one, no, we do a live and silent auction. We'll have Bill Jarts from WBAY as our auctioneer this year. We have a lot of company sponsors. It'll be at the Bridgewood in Neenah, and it'll have a lot of silent auction. The important thing is we will have people that we support and our staff to explain about what we do and how we can help families and the impact that we can have and how that they can access our services. And again, if we can't help them directly, we work extremely hard to connect them to find what resource or how they can get that need met that they have in caring for their loved one with dementia.
Now, I know you mentioned volunteers would be really, really helpful. But is there anything else that the community can do to be helpful?
Yes. If you know someone, whether it's today, tomorrow, next month, or a year from now, I would ask you to try to remember Fox Valley Memory Project and tell them to call us. Our phone number is 920-225-1711, 225-1711. If it's during normal working hours, we do everything we can to answer with a live person. If not, we get back within 24 to 48 hours, depending on weekends and holidays. If it's an emergency, leave that, and we will try to get back as soon as possible. But that's really the biggest thing, is if you know someone who is facing those challenges. And part of the reason for that is I think a lot of families, and I've seen this in a lot of people, they feel they can handle it. They can do it themselves. And that's okay as long as they can. But there's so much about this disease that if they would reach out to learn more, to understand why it's happening or why certain things are happening, to understand what to expect as the disease progresses, they would be much better prepared. So that's really my biggest ask, is to connect people to us. Tell them about our organization. All our services are free or very small cost. And so like the MindWorks classes do cost $15 to pay for the lunch. However, though, county helps us if people can't afford that. No one would ever be turned away because of financial reasons. We would never. We would always. So if there is any cost, it's always minor. There's no cost for the resource navigators to meet with, to talk to even do the home visit. That's all free services.
Is there any additional information you feel is important for the Appleton Engaged listeners to know that maybe we didn't ask today?
Yes, there is. There's two things actually. One is, what's the best thing to do to potentially prevent yourself from developing Alzheimer's or related dementia, and there is recommendations from the healthcare community. And then the second is, what if you are diagnosed, what does healthcare recommend that you do? And interestingly, because there still is no cure, there's no cure for the disease, the healthcare community can only do so much. But their recommendations, first, to prevent or to reduce your risk, and the second is, if you are diagnosed, to help with quality of life, is to be physically, mentally, socially active and engaged throughout your life, and particularly as you age, to reduce your risk of cardiovascular diabetes. There's a strong connection of heart disease, stroke risk to Alzheimer's and dementia. So all the things they've been telling us for years to eat better and, reduce your cholesterol so you don't have a heart attack is also good for reducing your risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. And equally, again, if you are senior and you are diagnosed, they would tell you to do the same thing. And there's no, some people say, oh, maybe it's too late. It's never too late to start to change, those things of being socially, physically, mentally active and doing things to improve your diet and what you do every day. And last thing I'd stress is the engagement side. People are social. As much as maybe some people think that, oh, it's okay to be alone, people don't really like to be alone. And people need contact with other people. They believe that during the pandemic, people with Alzheimer's and dementia passed away at 10 to 20, even higher percent faster than normal, and they attribute it solely to having no social interaction. So that's why it's extremely important for people that are affected by it. The worst thing to do is to sit at home and not try to stay active in some way, whether it's events that we do or with your friends, with your family. Stay actively, socially engaged.
Thank you, Mike. There is one thing left for you to do, and that is shout out time. What do you have for us?
Well, I've already gave a few. I have an amazing staff. They are not only skilled in how to help families about Alzheimer's and dementia, they're all extremely passionate. Most of us have, and I have a very dedicated board as well. And most of our board and most of our staff have personal connections. Personally, my mom passed from dementia, and many of us have a personal connection to this, so it's part of our mission. I also want to give a shout out to the United Way of both the Fox Cities, and now we're a partner organization down in Oshkosh as well. They're large supporters of us, the community foundations of the Fox Valley region, of the Oshkosh area, Wapaka. Those have all been great supporters. We also have some great foundation support, Theta Cares Family Foundation, J.J. Keller Foundation, the Nelson Family Fund, Gannett. Got some great companies that support us, the Bolt Organization, Myron Construction, Network Health. I could name a whole bunch, but I guess the biggest shout out is to the families that are continuing to live and find good quality of life through the challenges of this disease. And the second shout out is to their caregivers that are helping those individuals with the dementia. Again, live with as positive a quality of life as possible and to enjoy all of the time that you have on this earth.
Thank you, Mike. All right.
Thank you.
Appleton Engaged listeners, at this time, we're going to start wrapping up this episode, and I just want to take a moment and say thank you. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for caring about another important resource that's within our community, that's doing great things, that are taking care of the residents of Appleton. Thank you for caring overall. We are a work in progress. We want to become the best podcast in the Northeast Wisconsin region, but we need your help to be able to do that. So what can you do to help us? Well, there's a few things. Well, number one, if you have any recommendations on what we can do to be a better show, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Also, if you would like to be a guest or if you would like to suggest a guest, we are all ears. So you can reach us at diversity@appleton.org. Once again, that is diversity@appleton.org. Now, that's not the only homework that we're giving you. We got some more homework for you, and that is this. We would love for our podcast to get in front of more eyes and more ears of people within this region. And the way that is done is through analytics. And we need better analytics to get in front of more eyes and ears. Well, how do you improve analytics? Well, one is while you are listening to this podcast right now, take a quick second and press the subscribe button. And if you got a few more seconds, fill out a quick review and just tell us how we're doing here. Those things raise our profile, raise our analytics, and then we are shared in front of more eyes and ears within our region. We think we have something pretty special here, something that builds community, and we'd love it if more people were able to know about Appleton Engaged, the podcast. All right. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and wrap us up. So until next time, stay thoughtful, stay curious, and stay engaged.